please. And with tonight's meeting, we have both a special meeting as well as a study session, so there'll be a brief adjournment in between the two. And with that, City Clerk, can we begin our special meeting tonight with the roll call?
Mayor Sinanek.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Brinkman. Here. Councilmember Hopping.
Here.
Councilmember Valdez. Present. Councilmember Solomon.
Here.
And if everyone could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Council, we have one slight change to the agenda. 8B and 8C, which are part of the study session, will be reversed tonight to accommodate our guest. And with that, any other comments or suggestions, additions to the agenda? And then seeing none, we will move to unscheduled public appearances or citizen comments. Unscheduled appearances are an opportunity for any citizen to express opinions or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected. Typically, issues are referred to city staff for follow-up information or research and reported back to the council and the individual that initiated the comment or inquiry. If any citizen would like to speak during unscheduled public appearances, please complete a green citizen card, and they're on the table behind me at the entrance to the room here. And please provide that green card to the city clerk or leave it at the lectern that we are using this evening. So, would anyone? David?
I have no question. I have a comment.
Please go to the lectern and use the microphone.
A few weeks ago, I addressed City Council regarding the liability issue for members of the various staff, boards and commissions. And I had a great conversation with Kristen and then a letter from HR stating that we as commission members are covered like City Council would be covered. Is that correct? And that they do feel that the wording could be improved in the handbook in the process of revising it. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Susan?
Hi, my name is Susan Neese. Address is 7301 South Highland Drive, Littleton. As you know, since I spoke in opposition to its passage approximately a year ago tomorrow, I'm not a big fan of waiving the residency requirement for the city manager, but I was disappointed to learn that an extension of the waiver had been requested, but understand that it is needed in order for the city manager to close on his home here in Littleton in the next couple of weeks. I am happy and glad to hear that Mr. Penny is returning to live in the community and city that he manages, which I believe is critically important to the community and the city manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to comments and reports. And City Manager, any?
No report.
Okay, Councilmember Cole?
Sorry, is it ready to be called on here? Well, I would myself request that we pause for a few seconds in memory of the people who were killed. Well, there you go. Sorry. Got it right up here and still can't get into it. I'd request that we pause for 30 seconds or so in memory of the people who were killed in Charleston. Thank you.
Councilmember Stallman?
No report.
Councilmember Valdez?
No report.
Councilmember Hopping?
No report.
Councilmember Brinkman?
No report.
And just mine would be, hope everyone had a wonderful Father's Day for those fathers that are present, which I know is among the group here. So, and Just a reminder that we do have no meeting next Tuesday. We have no meeting Tuesday as well.
And I have no report either, Phil, you forgot me.
I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
No report.
Thank you.
But we don't have to hear you again.
No,
Okay, good.
I will not repeat. So we now come to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items can be adopted by a single simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Consent agenda item 6A is ID number 15-177. It's a motion to extend waiver of the city manager's residency requirement.
Pull that, please.
And then item 6B is a resolution 42-2015. It's a resolution approving a sewer service agreement and amendment to the 1973 agreement with Columbine Water and Sanitation District, Platte Canyon Water and Sanitation District, and Southwest Metropolitan Water and Sanitation District. So council looking for a motion with regard to consent agenda item 6B.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. And council, we will do it by a show of hands, if that's okay, and the city clerk can then record. So all those in favor of the consent agenda item 6B, please raise their right hand.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Councilmember Valdez?
Well, I just want to go back and review the agreement one more time if we could, because it was, last May? I think it was May of 2014, or something like that.
June 24th.
June 24th, there we go. I'm sorry, I was reading something else. And I know you're going to get back in the city, and I'm glad you are, thanks. The agreement that we had back then was after 6 months, though, you did lose 1 year of a month, whatever, I can't, the longevity, I think it was.
Correct.
So at this point, that's where we are, so that is now official, that it's
Correct.
not there. So this is just a matter of getting back into the city at this point.
Just the closing date.
Okay, cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, looking for a motion?
Move to approve consent agenda item 6A.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second, council. All those in favor signify by raising their right hand.
The motion is 7, the vote is 7-0. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, and council, we will now take 1 minute to adjourn and then enter into the study session.
We are now in the study session.
Thank you, Krista.
Wait, let me see. Who's going first, Phil? Is it Highline or City Council?
Second on the agenda.
Highline.
I can just leave it. Can I just leave it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, or you can take it. I can have Mark call you.
You think he's going to?
Yeah, this is fine.
You use it before.
No, I like to.
No problem. We both had 5 hours. Is he okay?
Whole right side.
It's not exactly the end of the world either, kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but please tell her
Okay.
whenever you see her, just thinking about her, kind of thing.
All right. I will definitely do that.
Folks now stating walking up the trail down there, Mary Carter. I tell you, the place.
8A, Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
Hi, it's my pleasure to introduce Harriet to the group, and also with her in the audience are Mike Rosser and Dave Lorenz, who've also worked on this project with Harriet. Harriet was a council member on Cherry Hills for 6 years, and during that time became associated with the Highline Canal Working Group. And the Highline Canal Working Group, as we know, but I'll refresh your memories, is dedicated to finding a lifetime for the Highline Canal when it ceases its operation as being a water carrier for Denver Water. And Harriet will be talking to you about that. And remind you, Council, we have an agreement with South Suburban to work on several of our trailheads around town to try to improve the connections to and from where the trails touch or the streets touch the Highline Canal. And we also are part of an attempt to improve safety at the corner of Ridge Road and Broadway as the canal crosses underneath Broadway. And then again, we're trying to figure out a way to make better passenger movement from there to the canal as it connects back again with Broadway a little farther south, or a little farther north, rather. So those are projects that we have ongoing. But what Harriet's going to talk to you today is really the big picture. This will be what will make the Highline Canal the legacy for our community for the future. Harriet.
Thank you, Bruce. You know, and Mayor, I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Cernanic, rhymes with ceramic. So
My name's Harriet Lemaire, as Bruce said, and I want to welcome Dave Lorenz and Mike Rosser, two really visionary leaders in terms of open space and trails and parklands in this part of the state of Colorado. You might know that Dave, of course, was head of South Suburban Parks and Rec for a number of years. And Mike was a leader with regard to a really valuable South Arapahoe County open space funding mechanism, which has allowed so much of this to happen. And so I want to thank them for coming here. We formed a conservancy. So this conservancy is a group of citizens that are committed to the Highline Canal. And so I'm representing that group. I've been hired recently after a number of months, as in maybe like 9 months of volunteering on behalf of the Conservancy, was hired as the director of the Conservancy. And we'll get into the funding and the planning that we're moving forward with for our Highline Canal in a little while. But I wanted to first talk a little bit about the history of the canal and some details about the canal that I thought you'd find interesting before we go into the rest of that. So let's see if I can get this to work. So there you can see the twisting nature of the canal. It's one of the longest continuous urban trails in the country. It's 71 miles long, over 100 feet wide, which equals over 950 acres of park space, which is a truly amazing amenity going through our community. And I think so many people don't understand how long it is and how valuable it can be from a recreational perspective. There are over 350 people that reside within 1 mile of the canal. Counts show that users are now exceeding 500,000 people. This is Waterton Canyon, where the Highline starts. It twists through the most populated areas of the state, crossing through radically varied communities. It begins in Waterton Canyon, as you can see there, and it ends up in Green Valley Ranch, which you see on the way to the airport, which is one of the most economically challenged areas in the whole region. The realities and the challenge of the canal are what has brought us all together as a group to talk about this. Over 80% of the water that Denver Water puts into the canal at this diversion structure that you can see there in the distance in the picture, it seeps into the ground or evaporates before it gets to a paying water customer. Denver Water rarely runs water in the final 22 miles. What does a dry and ignored Highline Canal look like? There's an image of it right there. Denver Water owns the canal and the 100-foot easement. And Denver Water, as we know, is in the water delivery business. Denver Water is focused on implementing water conservation measures. They currently spend over $1 million just to maintain and operate the canal trail. That's not including the seepage of all the water that goes in. We're trying to put a fiscal number on that soon. So planning is obviously needed. Here's a cottonwood that was cut down out in Aurora. We see these cottonwoods disappearing at alarming rates. Some of it is just lifespan, but also a lot of it is the lack of water in the Highline. The trail has multiple dangerous road crossings. There's an increased built-out environment that's resulting in a reduction of wildlife habitat and native vegetation. Now, this is when we start to talk about what I think is really exciting. There were a group of people that came together to talk about the canal. And at the time we first started chatting more beyond the Highline Canal Working Group, it was critical that those of us that were going to step forward to try to provide community leadership and ask people throughout the region to step forward and volunteer their time, other than, you know, the elected officials and the high-level staff that had sat on the Highline Canal Working Group. We wanted to know where Denver Water stood. That was very important. And Denver Water stated, and we have a letter from them saying, that over the next 5 to 10 years that the primary purpose of the canal will transfer from water delivery to some other purpose. They then stepped forward pretty quickly thereafter. This has all happened within 9 months to a year, to put money forward to fund our organization, to try to encourage us to harness the community commitment to the canal and get citizens involved in articulating what it is that all the different regions and sections of the canal, what people want. What is it that they see this canal, you know, what are the highest purposes of it in the future? So this is the beginning of that conversation. That's the roster of the very generous and amazing people that have stepped forward to sit on the board of directors. You can see that a woman by the name of Nina Eiton, Beardsley Eiton, is our chair. You have 2 of the members here and a number of other people that you'll recognize on that group there. We also have a council of advisors, and the honorary chair being Michael Mayer Hancock. There's a number of other people that have stepped forward that are either going to come onto the board or come onto the council of advisors. Critical to this group is the Highline Canal Working Group that Dave's been on. That's where I sat for a number of years when I was on the city council, and then when I was on a land preserve group, I was also on the Highline Canal Working Group. These representatives here, and from Littleton you have Bruce and Mike, have been critical in moving forward, thinking about the future of the canal. And as you know, with any complicated planning project, there needs to be a structure. And I would say that we have what looks like up there. Are we on that little thing? This is a dream team. I mean, this couldn't be better, and it's, you know, Arapahoe County's taken incredible leadership in creating this structure. So you have the Highline Canal Working Group, which are these people. This is, I think of the Highline Canal Working Group as a key leadership and technical advisory group. And then you have the core team, which is, sorry, you can't quite see it up there, but it's the counties and Denver and the city of Aurora sitting up there, with the Conservancy sits on that team too, and then the Highline Canal Conservancy. So we've gone out with that kind of a structure behind us and been able to raise quite a bit of money for the first phase of planning. The first phase of planning is it's public outreach, public education, and vision planning. Trying to, as I said earlier, come up with both visions for what each section wants, but also some ideas about the overall canal. What is it that this canal as a greenway can be? What is it that we want to see inside of the banks of the canal within the whole 100-foot easement? So what overlay things are going to tie the canal together that make it a regional gem for generations to come? How can we figure out the management structure, the funding? Those questions will come in the second phase. The first phase, we feel in Denver Water and the core team and all of our board feel it's really important to keep it open-ended and let citizens speak to their needs. And so we have a lot of crossover memberships between these groups, which will make it cohesive. We were formed out of the Highline Canal Working Group. They fully endorsed our effort when we first brought the idea forward. Let's see, let me move on to the funding piece, which you probably want to hear about. So this is it's a 3-year, 2-phased project. So Phase 1, we, in our grant to the Great Outdoors Colorado, which we recently received, we outlined it as an 18-month project for the visioning and outreach effort. But we're feeling that we'd like to shorten that up a little bit, nonetheless, because we don't want to lose the attention of the citizens. As once we get them involved, we want to go pretty quickly from that straight into the master planning and implementation planning. So you can see how the budget came together there, and then if you look at the next, you can see this incredible partnership of funding. And I think it's particularly important to note that all the numbers in italics in 2015 have already been secured, with the exception of all the funding from the jurisdictions. And the next slide will show you which jurisdictions the money's already in the bank from, and which I can tell you which I've already spoken with and where the funding sits. With that, we've modified the total amounts a little bit from the jurisdictions because we're afraid we're going to have a few that might not be able to participate in 2015 because our timing is so short moving forward. But we're keeping the expectation high with the hopes. But we just found out last week that we received the Gates Family Foundation grant of $50,000 for 3 years. And I think that the GOCO grant and the Gates Family Foundation, Denver Water, Arapahoe County, that family of partnerships speaks to what we all know, is that this community loves the Highline Canal. They want to do anything they can. We want to do anything we can to protect it and preserve it. And this large and costly planning effort is what experts in the field believe is the right direction. And well, I was shocked personally when the budget was first developed. As I'm seeing the different parts of it and the amount of public outreach we're going to have, we're committed to having 2 meetings in each of the jurisdictions. And then, in addition, all sorts of modern technical tools to try to get input from people, from interactive website questionnaires and things like that, to maybe even signs along the canal where you get your cell phone out and respond to things, moving lemonade stands. We're going to really try to get true and authentic input and not just have, public meetings. But some of the jurisdictions, I think, rightfully are probably concerned about the public meetings in their communities, and I talked to Mike Broughton about this in the past, but the thought there is that, we have Mike and Bruce on the Highline Canal Working Group, which will be advising, and whomever else, within the community needs to be involved on how to structure those outreach meetings in your community. So whatever plans, you have as council members and the staff has for the Highline Canal, that it's seamless, that those thoughts are put forward in front of the groups while these other ideas are sort of generating and trying to get more thoughts about the canal. So these numbers may be modified from, did you send them anything? Okay. So these have been, there was a range initially, and it was too confusing, and I knew I'd get the lower number of the range, so I just decided to put a number on there. So that's what we have for now, and so you can see Arapahoe County has put $80,000 forward. That's for the planning initiative. I think it's important to note that they've also put another $50,000 forward to support our effort. So our internal conservancy website and all the things that we're trying to do to move forward and create the community for planning. We'll be overseeing a group of consultants that will be hired. We've drafted an RFQ and are working with the core team on the RFQ. It's gone to our board in rough form. We hope to release that once we have to get this remaining amount from the jurisdictions, but we hope to release that in hopefully September 1, and then select someone and start community meetings in the fall. But probably the late fall, because I think that the consultants are going to have some work to do getting up to speed. And so that, and also the core team and Denver Water have some work to do. There are issues around, sort of the presentation of the idea of not using the canal for water that's going to cause serious consternation amongst particularly those contract holders along the highline. So we're thinking about how that's going to be presented. We're hiring some branding people and sort of trying to talk about it in a positive way, because it's a double-edged sword. Perhaps there won't be any more Denver Water in the canal, but on the other hand, they're partnering with the community, thinking about how it can be a greenway and willing to support that effort. So have more detail about the planning project, and I'm available for any questions you all might have.
If I could just make a comment to add to what Harriet's talked about. We are really fortunate in Littleton that in the 1970s we created the agreement with South Suburban Parks to maintain the walkway of the canal. For those that think back, who lived here at the time, that pathway used to have a chain across it. There was a lock on it, and only the person who was the maintenance had the maintenance responsibility for Denver Water could drive on it. This community changed that with an agreement through South Suburban to begin to build up the trail and enhance it and take care of it and cut it and maintain it and do some things. We are rather unique in that probably in the 71 miles of the canal, there's a few communities, probably less than on your hand, who have taken that degree of stewardship of the canal. And we've done it clearly. The goal is to find a way to do something similar to what we've done for 71 miles. And I just want to reemphasize that the impetus for this is there isn't going to be water in the canal anymore. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So finding a way to maintain the ground cover, the trees, replace the cottonwoods, find a way to keep this thing going is a tremendous, tremendous challenge. And it gets tougher in some of the other communities. So it was this awareness that the answer had to come from private sources. It had to come from kind of a community ownership point of view, not from government funds, for this thing to really work. Because in speaking to the experts, and one very particular expert talked about saying, if you don't get, the community, the nonprofits, the companies, the corporations, the kind of thing that this conservancy is doing, you will not be successful because no community can take this on and keep it going. So this is a very great effort, and that's kind of a little bit more of the background.
I did want to say something about conservancies. I sort of started and then lost track of my thought, but we, within the Highline Canal Working Group, we were so eager to have success for the Highline, and we were working sort of on infrastructure projects, the crossings and smaller things, but we knew, just like Bruce just said, that in order to really get the funding that we needed and to have this be a legacy project for this community, something that people want to go on the minute they get to Denver. They can't wait to get on the Highline Canal and experience this community, experience the different aspects of it, the different physicalities of it, the communities, the culture, the story of water in the West. We knew that we needed to do something more than work within the Highline Canal Working Group. So we started talking about, maybe a private group, and we were sort of getting pushed, as I mentioned earlier, but we knew that the citizen-based constituency was huge for the canal, which we all know because people use it all the time. And then it was interesting because the Trust for Public Land brought a man by the name of Adrian Benepe to town. Adrian Benepe was the New York Parks Commissioner. So he was the person that was there when Central Park started their conservancy. Well, Central Park, first of all, has a constituency around it that won't, it has huge capacity. Well, now, however many years later, I think it's like 30 years later, Central Park is funded, 86% of their funding is from private funding. So, and we all know the park has improved dramatically. And so that was sort of the first model for conservancies. And then you saw the Golden Gate Conservancy in San Francisco. You've seen there's a Friends group for the High Line in New York. Some of you might know they have their own High Line. And then there's the Beltway in Atlanta. It goes on. And these conservancies are being formed to support the efforts, and it's been highly successful. And so we thought, maybe we should look at that. And Adrian got onto the canal on a bike and was mesmerized and said, what you all have here is better. That's where we found out it was longer and more amazing than anything else, and really encouraged us to move forward. And, the people in Arapahoe County have been incredibly supportive too. But we think we have a great model, and we've had incredible success with Go Home and the Gates Foundation. We haven't yet reached too much into private citizens yet. for corporations. We plan to, but it was critical to get this funding in right away to get going on the planning. And I think once we get the image and the idea and the vision for the canal, that then raising the private funds will be easier too. So, yeah.
So, Harriet, I'm just going to try to summarize a little bit of what I heard, so I had it in my head anyway. What you're talking about that had the 15, 16, and 17 kind of budget associated with that is a phase one, which is primarily visioning as well as outreach.
If you separate that jurisdictional, let me get to it. If you separate 2016 in half, basically that's where the phase one and phase two separate.
Okay, so there's the phase one is the visioning and the plan, and then phase two is figuring out what do we actually do.
Master planning and implementation planning. We hope to go to the point of actually having the, having some projects ready to go right at the end of that, so that we, keep moving forward. And I think that with the work the Highline Canal Working Group's doing, there's been so much excellent background work done.
So then part of the master planning is a longer-term financing as well included?
The master planning section of this, so that 2017 and part of 2016 management, who's going to manage it? Is it still going to be done ownership? What's going to happen with the water? Will some of those ideas will come forward, but does the stormwater concept have legs? Are there other ideas? And what can it be dry? I mean, Dave, who truly is a visionary, he's talked about what you can do in the canal if it's dry. I've had so many people from bike groups are fascinated and really interested in this. One of them said, maybe we could bike down inside the canal through Welsher Golf Course, because they don't want to go off. A lot of people that love the canal don't want to not be able to go through the Welsher section, and there's the issue of the golf balls. He said, why don't we leave it dry there, and then we could bike ride down in the canal. So, there are a lot of, I'm off topic, sorry.
No, but part of that could be, we have kind of, I'll refer to it, let's see, I better use the right words, a wetter environment than what exists in Aurora, as an example. So the plan is not necessarily to have the same fabric or texture across, or at least there isn't any preconception for that.
This is a bottom-up planning effort where the jurisdictions speak to what they want it to be. I'm from Cherry Hills. Some people in Cherry Hills may want to be taxed, to have water continue. I don't know. I think that the communities need to speak to that. No one wants Denver Water to stop running the water through the sections, I guess it's 50-some miles that they do run it through, or 44. But they've made their case, as I tried to make for them.
And we have some additional water diversion that has occurred over time to feed one of our lakes. So
we have a little bit of seepage in from some of the stormwater too, and there's a number of areas. So, there are some models to encourage that stormwater, which, we'll be looking at that carefully. But so those issues, I think that the uses and the visions for the future of the Highline Canal will drive the management and the structure that we come up with for it. It's premature to think that our conservancy would manage it, because we don't know yet, and if so, clearly someone else will need to be in charge. But, we're moving forward, and I think that the community, it's time, for the first time in the history of the Highline Canal, all the parties are at the table together in good faith, and Denver Water's really at the table, so.
it's good that they are, because they're the owners.
They are the owners, good point.
So, and then I imagine between the mayor pro tem and the city manager, whatever call to action specifically that we have, that will come forward to us in the appropriate time.
So would you then vote on that in a council meeting where I should come?
For the funding for 2015, I need to talk to Mike. We probably have money appropriated already, and we can just do it. So He's nodding his head, so I'll take that as a yes.
If you have that higher range, that's a good thing, too.
I don't see a range. Yes.
Well, and just to add, the two big projects we have over on this side of town, which are the Platte River and all those improvements, and the Highline Canal and those improvements, we do need to look real hard at this upcoming budget, because we've spent so much of our Arapahoe County money, we've just about bottomed it out at this point to get these projects going. So there's going to be a little bit of prioritization, but the Highline and the river are the two big ones.
You have a spectacular community. I mean, it's just really lovely out here, and I think that your downtown area has just really come a long way and really fun.
Be careful of flattery, Harriet.
Of what?
Of flattery.
Oh, no, I do. Well, I live in an area where we don't have any commercials, so it's not any fun. Yeah, we do. But are there any other questions? Yeah.
As it goes through this transition, obviously, from having water in it that fuel cottonwoods to an environment where there are none, there'll be a tremendous turnover in that environment. It's one of the richest wildlife habitats in the country. Like some bird species, for example, thrive on dead trees. That's where they nest, and that's why they're in rapid decline nationally. Who takes the lead on that kind of transformation? It seems to me that'd be a really fundamental part of having the transition.
The wildlife, needs the water, as you're saying. So that'll be a big part of the discussion. And, so that will drive decisions about, which sections. It might be that we section this off, where certain sections have water and other sections don't. If it's not going to be run, and it needs to be either urban drainage water or other water that comes from some other source. That certain areas may be important enough that there might be, let's say Littleton really wants water, maybe their portion or their share of whatever funding mechanism we come up with is higher because of that. I don't know how it's going to work.
But is that a team approach that you get? I noticed Department of Wildlife is in there, and you get in outside consultants for
Absolutely.
muskrat preservation or whatever.
I'm sure that during the community outreach that we'll be doing like a scan of what's needed on the wildlife side and getting experts in. Yeah.
We're a little ahead of that curve because South Suburban is aware of that. So, there are some folks that say, well, how come we have dead wood? Why are there still, trees down along the canal? It's because of that. It's because they're maintaining a wildlife, a whole ecostructure. And we're more aware of that because South Suburban's work on the canal than perhaps others in that 70 miles. So from a community-based point of view, it matters to us. We're already committed. It's the way we want it. We just have to figure out how to fund it and then how to manage it in this new model where we just can't be paying for it out of maybe taxpayer funds. We're going to find a private source.
There have been some pilot studies done on irrigating the new trees along the canal.
Drip system for
Yeah.
cottonwood would be
No,
expensive.
not for cottonwood, for other less thirsty.
Well, and there will be some turnover. For example, the state won't let cottonwoods be planted. So there will be a turnover in trees over time. So it's
They are ending their life cycle, those big ones are.
okay. Thank you, Harriet and Dave and Mike, for being here, and appreciate it.
Thanks for the time.
Excellent. And we'll take a minute or two break for Mary Kay.
If we don't have a presentation, we can just start right out.
Okay.
Thank you.
You can or you can't. You can do it. Okay.
I think you said no.
No, we're not going to take a break.
Yes. Okay. Mary Kay, could we get you? So I'd like to introduce Mary Kay with Sterling Ranch. I think most of council is aware of Sterling Ranch. It's a large subdivision to the southwest of us, and the conversation started years and years ago in their early planning stages about Originally, there was talk of annexation into Littleton, and then there was talk of tying their sewer and water system into ours, obviously Denver and the Littleton Inglewood wastewater treatment plant. So that has been whittled down to a startup connection and then an emergency backup connection. And so with that kind of broad overview, I'm going to let Mary Kay jump into a little bit more of the details about how that evolution came to end up with what we're going to propose to you tonight. What we wanted to do tonight was just kind of get the pulse of the council around their support of the startup connection and then the emergency backup system, and then the attorneys for Sterling and Kristen and I are working on, along with Mary Kay, what that actual contract would look like. So it would come back to the City Council for approval of the contract. So with that, Mary Kay, it's all yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Mayor and City Council. My name is Mary Kay Provoznik. I'm the Utilities Director for Dominion Water and Sanitation District. Also work with the Sterling Ranch Community Authority Board. Those are the entities that provide service to Sterling Ranch community, as he said. That is a 3,400-acre development just south of Chatfield. We're your neighbors. The Douglas County has approved the plan development for the entire site, as well as the sketch plan and the plat for the first filing of around 800 homes. To do that, we developed Dominion Water and Sanitation District. It's actually been around for a while. It will provide both the wastewater, the water, and the stormwater service. To provide service, we have started down the road of a regional wastewater system, which includes purchasing the existing Roxborough wastewater plant that is on Waterton Canyon Road. That will be the core of our wastewater system. Of course, there's a ridge, so if any of you have ever been in infrastructure, you know that when developers decide to develop, they always start in the hardest place to provide service. Well, that's what has happened here too. So we're looking at an interim plant that's on the east side because there's a ridge right down the middle that goes one way to Plum Creek and one way to South Platte. Ultimately, the whole system will have a force main that brings all that water over to the existing wastewater facility. In many ways, we are tying our system to Roxborough. We are also participating in their water treatment plants. We are participating in infrastructure that makes sense to both parties, where there's extra capacity and where backup works for both sides, both on water and wastewater, fire flow and other opportunities. What we are requesting from you is a similar deal where the lift station for Roxborough is next to the existing wastewater treatment plant that we plan on operating. We had already talked about sharing the spillover pond that is between the two facilities. We are looking at piping the two facilities together, and just as these things work on a long-term basis, the wastewater for Roxborough comes to Littleton, so we would like to connect this to further belt and suspend a system that would completely operate on its own. Also, when you start up a wastewater plant, it doesn't like 5 houses. It doesn't know when it's going to flush the toilet. So we're looking for a way that we can start the facility, get a few homes going, get enough flow that we can keep the wastewater facility operating efficiently, and so that is part of our request. I wasn't sure how much information you would like. I can talk for hours, so I am here to answer any questions that you have on that system.
And maybe you could go into just the base details. So the proposal around 200 homes,
yes,
$440,000, and go into a little bit of the details of the funding.
So the way this particular request is maybe different than other interconnects that just provide that backup is the startup component of the agreement. What we proposed was, so that you knew that there would be funding, we'll have the plant operational, but in the meantime, we would like to use your facility for that startup. So we're proposing $200 per home per year. That way, it's not based on flow. It's very similar to Roxborough's agreement, and it kind of runs through that. And with a minimum of 40,000, whether we use 5 homes or 100 homes, we'd have a minimum of 200 homes, which would equal $40,000 per year when we hook up.
And then I believe it was $200 per home above the 200.
That's correct. So it would continue up. I'm sorry. 40,000 is a minimum to 200 first home would be 40,000 and 200 and would continue up that scale as we exceeded the 200 homes.
And Mary Kay, with the using the startup, I have a series of questions, so I'll try and ask them in a logical order anyway. So that covers the startup position. When do you think you might become operational or at the point where it would no longer be in a startup mode?
It's a really good question, and it doesn't have a completely simple answer. Part of that is driven by the market and how many homes we sell. 200 homes is still less than is efficient to operate the plant. We could, and we would if we needed to. The plant would be operational from day one. It's a permitted plant. It's operational today, so we could operate it. It just would be more efficient to use your service. Right now we have approximately 800 homes in filing one, and that would be adequate. It would be really a financial decision between you and us. There is an annual check-in on the agreement that we are suggesting.
Okay, so because I'll go to the annual check-in, we know there's compliance issues over time where improvements in the plant need to be made. It would probably be unfair not to be in some position to, if we're assessing for that with our other users, to not be in a position to at least bring that to the table. As long as there's a check-in to say, hey, here's where we're going to be, and we have an opportunity to do that, that would make some sense.
That was what I was hoping we could come up with, something that would work for both parties on that.
And we don't know because the EPA and Water Quality Control have their vagaries, as you might imagine.
Yes, we're aware of those and I'm sure your pain's in that.
Okay. Other questions from council? Bruce?
Really?
This meeting is for you, actually.
Yes, thank you. I guess to cut to the chase on this thing, I mean, we've obviously spoken with your associates over a period of time and had tried to make some arrangements to get some temporary water flow to them for this purpose. I understand there's some technical issues that are hard to overcome, but on the other hand, if you're prepared to hook into our wastewater treatment plant on this basis, can you help me understand why it wouldn't make more sense economically over the long term to take our existing fixed cost structure and spread it over your customers the way you're talking about doing it versus build a new or restart the old facility that's out there and subject yourself to all of the vagaries that Phil just elaborated on?
I completely agree. If wastewater service was the only service that we were providing, the biggest challenge for us really is the price of water supply. And we totally intend on using every drop that we can. The water supply that we have is fully consumable. So our plan is to reuse all of our water supply and to have it come all the way down here, which would be great for wastewater because, as you know, regionally, we can approach the Water Quality Commission's changes and other regulatory changes much stronger. Pardon me, allergies. However, the water supply is so valuable that it makes it hard to find the financial balance to let the water go downstream.
Even with WISE being in place?
Especially with WISE. WISE is an interruptible water supply, so some years can be zero, and therefore the return flows are steady. We know what the return flows are going to be, and that's part of our base to be able to handle the variability of WISE.
Okay. And did you stipulate, or did I miss, you said 200 homes per year with some sort of a step up, and the estimated time horizon for that arrangement, did you mention that, or did I just not hear it?
If I understand your question, like how fast do you actually start getting housing?
Well, yeah, I mean, in other words, you're going to start building, you're going to hook in, you're going to commit to 200, you're going to start building, and it'll ratchet up, and then it'll
Yes.
get to the next 200, and so forth and so on. How long do you envision your need to utilize our service in that way?
So I don't, it's more based off of a flow, and we're still figuring out what the efficient flow is on our treatment facility. We're looking at 3 or 4 years max. It could be less.
Okay, and this was just an operating charge. There was no tap fee, if I understood it correctly?
We plan on having our treatment system up and running. This is basically a backup and an efficiency kind of a contract.
Okay, and we've looked at it from a variable cost standpoint in terms of what it would cost to serve these, and it's certainly satisfactory in terms of, okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Questions, Councilor Jerry?
Yeah, just a quick question. Thanks very much. And I've had the presentation on the Sterling Ranch, and it's quite a project. It's cool. It's sort of exciting to see it happen. But, so we're only talking here wastewater. We're not talking about actually providing water. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is just a wastewater service.
To use our facility?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Other question?
Refresh my memory, there would be no additional new piping that would have to be installed through Littleton to get up to the wastewater treatment plant. Is that correct?
That is correct. We talked to Roxborough about their capacity in their line, and we would have a separate agreement with them for that capacity. Of course, we can't have that agreement unless we have one with you because we can't send flow to nowhere. So.
With that, thank you, Mary Kay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark Kay.
All right, the last agenda item is, oh, that didn't work. Sorry, I wasn't really going to use it anyway.
Yeah.
You can probably go back up there and you can join me in this conversation, but council had previously directed staff to put together a request for proposals for a downtown streetscape, and at the time we were really discussing Main Street and Alamo between Santa Fe and really around the railroad tracks area, Rio Grande. No, up left a little bit, there you go, beautiful. And we started putting that together, and then during the study session, Councilman Valdez discussed how do you tie in Littleton Boulevard all the way over to Broadway. And so after further discussion, ultimately what we put together was an art request for proposals that did go from Santa Fe to Broadway. And this really emanated, I think, and has been percolating primarily in the downtown for years. You guys have heard, there's a parking problem in the downtown. There's, you've got trees in the middle of the sidewalk. You've got trees on the edge of the sidewalk. You've got sandwich board signs. You've got bike racks that were put in various places on there. It's just been a slow evolution of a downtown as it continues to grow and modify itself. And some of the trees we heard about the cottonwood trees, some of the trees downtown are in that same place. And so it really culminated in this thought of, and I think part of what drove this as well was and I can't think of the woman's name right now, Mike, but the one woman who did Kristen Slifer, who did the downtown wayfinding program. And so culminated in this conversation around the RFP. Council members Brinkman and Valdez participated with staff on reviewing the request for proposals. It just couldn't make it after that. It was injured. And we had, I believe, five or seven responding companies, and we narrowed it down to Civitas. Civitas came in. They're a great company. Most of you have probably heard of Civitas. They came in at $300,000, substantially higher than the others, and so we looked for the two council reps to provide some direction. They said it's got to be under $200,000, so we looked at scope, and they came in at $199,800 or something around that, so they broke the council's barrier line. But there's really three projects included in this, and it will probably continue to be modified. And the first is really looking at that design streetscape in the downtown area, that Rio Grande to Santa Fe, Alamo, and Main Street. The second is the streetscape between, really, I'm going to say Windermere and Broadway along Littleton Boulevard. What do we want the look and the feel to be along that stretch? And then our now vacated position of the Community Development Director, but Glenn had also wanted to utilize this public outreach and incorporate the update to the Littleton Boulevard corridor plan as part of that. So we had included that in. I do want to tell council that I think when we have Jocelyn Mills, who's going to be starting late next month, I think part of what we want to do is have the conversation with her around what are her thoughts about merging this versus potentially having more public process and more focus points on the downtown streetscape and the Littleton Boulevard streetscape. So don't know how council feels about that. I think Glenn was hoping to get one more bird with that same stone. May make sense to do that ultimately. The point of that is that I think the scope may modify itself based upon what we ultimately want to do, and we'll continue to work with council members Brinkman and Valdez as we refine that scope a little bit. I really feel like we have, and I've talked to some citizens about that, we have an opportunity in both of these projects to really re-engage in a new fashion in our public outreach and public process. You all are familiar with the issues around the signage, outdoor merchandise, the issues around the new signage program. There's some people that love it, some hate it. It's going to be installed here before too long, and so people are really going to love it or hate it. And so I would personally, if council is comfortable, I would rather, as we work with the two council members I spoke of, refine it down and really emphasize the public process and the public outreach part of it, which is a higher priority for me, which is easy to say, than updating the Littleton Boulevard corridor plan. I think we can be guilty of trying to do too much at one time, overwhelming ourselves, overwhelming citizens who are out living their lives, and we wave our flag and say, okay, now it's time to come down and talk to us. And I'd rather focus on getting the design streetscapes done correctly and with an outcome that people can say it was a good process. I like this part of it, I like that part of it, but we really can get to a place of consent, if not consensus, around where we land at that. And the folks I've talked to, including the Downtown Merchants Board, are very excited about this project, so we have an opportunity to re-engage in a much more positive manner than what we've been engaging in the past. So happy to answer any questions. I wasn't going to drill down in specific scope or details around that. I think you all know what a design streetscape process is. So we're going to, if council's comfortable, we're going to move forward. Again, I'll continue to work with Jerry and Debbie, refine that scope, and when Jocelyn comes on board, get her thoughts as well around that process. And obviously, Bill will have a keen interest in the downtown streetscape as well. Yeah, we're going to be coming back. We're going to work with Doug Farman, Finance Director Farman, on looking at the funding for this, and we will ultimately have council approve the contract, and if we need an additional appropriation at that time, that'll be included as part of the motion of the approval of the contract. Doing this first because I wanted to give council a heads up that the scope may continue to change, obviously, and then have an impact on the price. It'll be downward, not upward, though.
Good.
Yeah, I know.
With all that's involved, just to put some sort of time frame, since public engagement is going to be a keen part of this, what kind of time frame is anticipated at this point in time, recognizing it may change as some of the scope changes, but roughly when do we see getting out to the public and having something on that basis?
Mike, you want to speak? While Mike's coming up, I mean, one of the things I'd really like to do is wait until Jocelyn gets either on board or she's offered to come and talk to us in advance of that, because I really don't want to move forward without having our community development director who is really leading this process, involved in it. It's an opportunity for her to meet and engage with the public, and so she's not scheduled to start until July 27th, and so we're a little bit out until we start this conversation. And then you can imagine part of what we want to do is talk to Civitas and the downtown merchants and other businesses along the corridor around what's good timing, what works. We don't want to get in the way of them making their money, type of thing.
So to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, Mike Broughton, Deputy City Manager, the total project length is approximately 9 months. So whenever we do get started, it's anticipated the project will be about 9 months.
And that doesn't, I'm sorry, Mike, and that does include the land use component, so that dynamic can change.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the initial proposal, or the revised proposal timeframe, so as it stands.
So let me try and interpret or hypothesize a response, at least at one end, which is Ms. Mills starts sometimes at the end of July. There'll be some discussion between her with Civitas, so it's likely no public engagement will begin until September-ish at even an early date.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair.
I'd be optimistic and hope for August, but it might be September.
You said she started July 27th.
I also said maybe we can get her in here earlier and start those conversations. So, when we're starting to deal with, when we start to move further to the east, we have residents in there. It's looking in, do those people have kids? Are they out on vacation up until mid-August when school starts up again? I mean, there's a lot of those types of conversations that we want to be strategic about when we do the outreach, so we're really maximizing the opportunity for public feedback and input. So, but sure, September.
Well,
in ideal laboratory conditions.
I was just trying to put at least a stick in the sand to say, if we don't hear anything other than approval of a contract between now and September, and no one else hears much other than
we'll keep you in the loop. I mean, I really, in working with Bill and the other council members and the downtown, right now the proposal was to do the Littleton Boulevard strip first. We may want to flip that ultimately based upon what the merchants' time frame throughout the year, when's a good kind of lull time for them to be able to participate with us.
So when you say the merchants, I assume you mean building owners as well, because they obviously have a huge stake in that. You're
yes.
talking downtown collateral.
Downtown
Stakeholders.
Right, and
constituents.
At one point it was mentioned that they, in the actual revised proposal, they talk about hoping to have concurrent meetings with Littleton Boulevard and Main and Alamo, and I would frankly encourage that to be separated because the character of those areas is so dramatically different. The stakeholders are
so
different.
Would we.
Okay. And the other comment I had is...
That's part of pulling out the land use component so we can not increase the budget, but we can utilize the money that we would have spent on that project to separate out and have more meetings than they had projected.
Okay.
I think they underestimated, no, probably underbid the number of public meetings we'd like to have.
Okay. Which I think you have a very good feel of. The other comment or question I had is in the original proposal, they had Nan Anderson involved, who's an historic context person, and in the revised proposal, she's not in there, and I wonder how they would intend to make sure that the streetscapes proposed are compatible with the historic character of downtown.
That was a request, or that was a recommendation from our historic preservation staff, that was not a expense that we felt like we needed Civitas to manage, but that we could manage that ourselves, that component of it.
Additional add-on too, there's historic assessments occurring in the Loudon neighborhood as well as along the Littleton Boulevard corridor as well. So those are occurring concurrent to this process as well. So there'll be some involvement there.
Okay, as long as there's a mechanism to make sure that compatibility is there.
And the only thing I would ask at some point in time is with the contract, that maybe there's some thought in the context of the contract to include what's the issue that we're trying to address so that it's somewhat clear. It's probably in the documents that are there, but to make sure that that is part of what comes to council as far as the contract, and that there's almost a consensus around, okay, here's the issue, and we are the right people to be dealing with it.
Got it.
Also, when I looked in there, there were a lot of questions I would have, but one of them, and you've addressed it, City Manager, was the communication and the outreach. It looks like they have a system that they are actually making part of this. It's one of the modules for communication. We just have to make sure it's going to accomplish our goal, because sometimes we haven't done that very well.
That's why they have it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
If I may be so direct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So just a practical question. And we've got the cost of the actual studies, right, or the plans.
Yep.
I'm assuming there's a big chunk of money involved if we go forward with a plan. So how are we thinking to be funding stuff?
We have a money press printing that Doug's got in the back.
I saw some
No,
going up into your office.
I think if you go back to the original discussion, study session on this, I think it was Councilman Brinkman who actually originally said, let's not do this because of the magnitude. When we get through this, we would anticipate that there's going to be a fairly significant design shift, and those are millions of dollars. I mean, part of where we would plug this in is the work that Mike's been doing on our capital needs assessment along with our Public Works Director, and build that in and see if we can phase it, and then it will be up to the council, up to, similar to what Councilman Beckman said earlier around the High Line, is prioritize where those dollars go. And ultimately, do you want to go to the voters and ask them to bond some money based to, kickstart this project? Can we fund it over a period of time? What's the logical breakdown on a phasing program? Because it might make sense to do a block a year, and that might be a very doable amount of money that we can fold into the existing project list. But it's a question of what that public process gets us at the end.
So I'm sure you all didn't have time to read what I sent of my report, of my whole report from CML, but one of the issues I'd like us to talk about in the next few months is providing multi-access broadband to citizens and businesses, because I think having that is going to help us attract and retain people for the long term. So, but that's a big budget item too. So, so we're going to be
let's talk
tearing up.
offline on that, because we're working with our private providers
Okay,
on that.
but the only reason I'm saying that is if we're tearing up blocks or whatever, we'd want to incorporate something maybe at the same time.
Yep. I believe that every time we're tearing something up, now we're putting conduit in.
Okay,
So
okay. But
we're
that
on
was
it.
an important
Yep, absolutely.
thing for public to know.
It's
Thank you so much.
been important for us.
Yeah, thank
well.
you.
All right.
Anything else, council?
All right. we'll
Seeing
continue
nothing else, a
with the-
reminder, next Tuesday, we are not meeting, so July 7th is our next meeting, and everyone have a wonderful and safe 4th of July. Cheers.
Oh, yes. Thank you.